All right. One of the advantages of recording myself is, I'm posting these, but I also get to review it, and you always get to see things you missed out and see if you can explain things better. So I in the first year, I mentioned the pasuk which proves that Yom Kippur atones. So the pasuk says, "V'chiper al hakodesh, tumas bnei Yisrael mipishayim." So I gave like this Chassidish explanation, but I failed to mention the simple reading. The simple meaning of the verse is, "V'chiper al hakodesh tumas bnei Yisrael." It's an atonement for people who entered into the holy. So I don't remember where I read this translation, that "V'chiper al hakodesh," you have to atone for the holy, as if the holy source of the Jewish soul also needs atonement. I can't remember where I saw it, but or maybe I just thought of it, I don't know. Either way, it's an interesting little twist, but I just thought I failed to mention the simple explanation, which I should have mentioned. And it's interesting because this pasuk actually isn't quoted by the Gemara. This passage in the Gemara, which says that Yom Kippur finishes the atonement for a violation of a negative commandment, the text there brings a different pasuk, and yet the Alter Rebbe brings this pasuk. So I thought I'd mention that. Okay, now we're going to Perek Beis. Perek Beis and Gimel, obviously they come after Perek Aleph. And in chapter 1, we concluded that we have, so far, 3 stages in the process of Teshuvah. The first is Teshuvah. The first is the essential Teshuvah, the essence of Teshuvah, which is the decision to no longer rebel against Hashem. That's the essence of Teshuvah. Stage 2 is Shleimus HaTeshuvah. Shleimus HaTeshuvah is the perfect or the completion of Teshuvah, which comes along with other halachic obligations, like confession, regret, asking forgiveness, and things of that nature. And then the last thing we mentioned was that in many of the Sifrei Musar, many of the works of Musar, it says different fasts that a person should take upon themselves if they violated a commandment, a negative commandment for which one would be liable for capital punishment, a very severe negative commandment. Then the person should do fasts. And as the Alter Rebbe explained it at the end, and the way the Rebbe interprets that, it's a kind of prayer asking Hashem either the kapara should be quicker, or asking Hashem to avoid too much pain and punishment, right? Because the Gemara says that, the passage we quoted from says that violating a negative commandment of capital punishment, a person has to have pain in life to get kapara. So over here he's praying to Hashem through fasting that he shouldn't get it. And also he wants to make sure that his teshuvah is out of love. So he's kind of fasting and praying. Now, chapters 2 and 3, the Alter Rebbe gets to another level, a 4th stage in teshuvah, which comes after all of the above. In chapter 2, he explains the way this was in temple times, and then the way it was in post-temple times. And then in chapter 3, he's going to explain how that translates to today's day and age, this last level. And then, so this is all still part of like the technical, detailed part of the practicalities of Teshuvah. Okay, Perek Beis. However, calls that all of the above, all the different things a person has to do above, the 3 levels we mentioned, the essence of Teshuvah, a complete Teshuvah, and then if it's a negative commandment for which one would be liable for capital punishment, and the kapara is through pain, so a person can add this extra kindness in a prayer, these fasts in a prayer. All of this is in kapara. All of this is in the hopes of getting a kapara and atonement, and being forgiven for the sin, that if his teshuvah is done right, he's completely forgiven, for the fact that he has violated the king's command. When he does complete teshuvah, this is where the term teshuvah shalema comes from. Shleimus HaTeshuvah comes from, as opposed to mitzvah HaTeshuvah, the essential mitzvah of teshuvah, which is the abandonment of sin. Here's teshuvah shalema, which comes along with vidui charata, confession, regret, and all the rest of that. So a person does this complete teshuvah, so he's forgiven. ve'ein maskirin loy, and it's not mentioned to him. Davar, nothing, v'chatzi davar, nor half a thing. Be'yom hadin, in the day of judgment, la'anchel, that to punish him for his sins, chas v'shalom, God forbid, because he's been completely forgiven by Hashem. Where isn't he punished? Ba'olam haba, in the world to come. V'nifter l'gamri min hadin, and he's completely exonerated in judgment, ba'olam haba, in the world to come. So, the Alter Rebbe mentions the world to come because, first of all, in this world, by capital punishment, the punishment of a court, you're not exonerated for that because you did teshuvah. As a human judge, ein l'dain ela masha ein avrois. Judge can only judge based on what his eyes see. In other words, what the evidence is presented before him. He has no idea what's in your heart, and he doesn't know if your teshuvah is shlema, is complete, and he certainly has no idea if God forgave you or not. So the forgiveness is between you and God. In the human court, you're still going to have to deal with whatever the court delineates to you, whatever the punishment happens to be. That's first of all. Secondly, the Alter Rebbe here mentions twice Olam Haba. He's not mentioned anything to punish him in Olam Haba, and he's exonerated from judgment in Olam Haba. Olam Haba, of course, translates as the world to come, and therefore it's possible. And it seems like this is how Rabbi Steinsaltz is learning it in his commentary on Tanya, which is a fantastic commentary. That Olam Haba means life after death, that a person is not punished in his personal judgment, and as well as the collective before Mashiach's coming. Perhaps that's what it means. The bottom line is, because he did teshuvah, and his teshuvah was proper and complete, teshuvah shlema, it's a wholesome teshuvah, it's the perfect teshuvah, including all the halachic obligations, and it's accepted by Hashem, therefore he's forgiven. So his balance sheet has been cleared. He's no longer a wicked person, that's for sure, even before kapara. By the very fact that he did teshuvah, he's no longer a wicked person, but his kapara has been given. He's already been atoned as far as his relationship with Hashem goes. No punishment. He comes to heavenly court, to God's court. He's clean. He paid his due. Amnam, however, after all that's done, he's already been forgiven. There's still another thing he has to deal with. And this is Sheyiyah l'ratzon l'fnei Hashem, in order that he should be wanted before God. Umerutza v'chaviv, and desired and beloved. L'fanav yisbarach, before him, capital H, may he be blessed yisbarach. That he should be beloved in the same way he was before he sinned. So that from henceforth his service to Hashem is pleasing to Hashem. And this is another level. Right, so by using an example of two human beings who are in a problem, in a fight, in something. Okay, so one person wronged somebody else. He goes, he says, "I'm sorry," and he really means it. And business partners, and one person hurts the other one in the partnership. So the one who hurts comes and he sincerely apologizes, he's never going to do it again. He abandons his ways and he forgives, and he begs for forgiveness and all the rest of it. And the partner says, "You're forgiven, all is clean. I'm not going to take you to court for it. I'm not going to press charges. You're forgiven. Do you want to do business again?" Not necessarily. So a person can be forgiven, and his debt, his scoreboard is clean, but it doesn't mean he's going to be wanted again. The same thing is true of his relationship with Hashem. A person can sin, do teshuvah, get kapara, get forgiven, but it doesn't mean, so like the teshuvah is starting a new chapter in life. From now on, I'm no longer a sinner, I only serve God. It doesn't change the fact that you once upon a time were a sinner, which even if God's not going to punish you for that behavior because you did what you had to, it doesn't mean necessarily that you're as beloved as you were before. So now you want to do something to make yourself beloved just as you were before. So what's this for? So what would you do to deal with that? You'd have to bring an offering in temple times, a korban olah, a complete burnt offering, which means it was completely burnt on the altar, as opposed to some other offerings where the kohen who offered it ate some of the offering, or the person offering ate some of the offering. And olah is all completely burnt on the altar. And he would bring this offering, afilu mitzvah aseh kala, even on a light, positive commandment. In the three categories mentioned in the first brisa, about how long it takes to get atonement, mitzvah saseh, failing to do a positive commandment, was the quickest. It was right away. As soon as you get to teshuva, you're forgiven. So even, in the end of the last thing, it said you're fasting for if you fail to do a positive, if you violated a negative commandment for which you're liable for capital punishment, which is a very high level, then you're fasting to ask Hashem that your atonement be quicker or whatever it is. But over here he's saying that you're bringing a carbon even after teshuva, after kapara, but even for the lightest of sins, for failing to do a positive commandment, the one which takes the least kapara, you're still bringing a carbon oiler, you're still bringing this offering for that.
And halachically, you're obligated to bring one if you're on?
It seems like that. It seems like this is what they used to do back in the temple times. Yeah. There's no capital punishment, not by the hands of heaven, not by the hands of the court, for failing to do a positive commandment. And nevertheless, they would bring this oila. As our sages expounded on the verse in Teras Kohanim. Teras Kohanim is a halachic medrash. Al pasuk on the verse which says v'nir tzaloi. It's describing the carbon oil, and it says v'nir tzaloi. And it's v'nir tzaloi means that it's made wanted for him, or he's made wanted by it. And the Teras Kohanim there says that this refers to someone who failed to do a positive commandment. That this is the person who's bringing the oila, so that it should be nir tzaloi. Okay, this is the Gemara says in chapter 1 of Zvachim, the oila mechaperes atones al mitzvah saseh for failing to do a positive commandment. What kind of atonement is this? He'll explain in the parentheses what the translation of the word atonement means. It's not the same translation as chapter 1. I'll explain that in a minute. But it atones for, what kind of atonement is this? V'hi darin, and this is a gift. La'achar sha'asa teshuva, after he's completely done teshuva. The nimchalei la'onesh, and he's been forgiven for his punishment. So he did teshuva properly, complete teshuva, plus he has kapara, he's been forgiven. Nevertheless, he brings this gift. And by way of example, Alter Rebbe says, "Ka'adam, like a person, shesarak mamelech, who offended the king, ufaisai, and appease him ide praktatin, through advocates who advocated on his behalf, umachaloi, and the king forgives him. But doesn't necessarily mean the king ever wants to see him again. I forgive you. You're not going to get punished, but don't come back to my court again. I'm going to run the country without you."
Yeah, but in this case, he didn't really do himself. He used other people.
Because he doesn't want to. Because the king doesn't even want to see him. So he has to send messengers to advocate for him that he shouldn't get punished. So the king says, "Okay, fine. I accept your advocacy, and I believe you when you say that he's remorseful, and I believe you when you say that he's no longer going to do it again. I believe all of that, and he really means it. Fantastic. So we're going to clean his score. We're not going to punish him for anything, but I don't want to see him again in my court. I'm going to run the country without the guy. As much as I'm going to forgive him, and therefore he's got to do something now to re-win the king's graces. Not that he shouldn't be punished. He's not getting punished anyway, but that he should be re-invited to the king so that he can continue to work with the king, that he can rebuild his relationship, right?" Nevertheless, even though he's been forgiven, Shalech Darin, he sends gifts to mincha and offerings. What does he call mincha? Yeah, and everybody's using the example. Yeah. So, lefanav, before the king, that the king should be wanted, that he should be wanted by the king, to be able to see the king's face again. So it's kind of like when two human beings get into a fight, right? Take the closest of relationships, between spouses. Our relationship with Hashem is compared to husband and wife, as you often hear. So when there's a fight, there's only two directions it can go as a result of that. Sounds very doom and gloomy, but this is the reality. Either it's just not as good as it used to be, even if you're forgiven, and the other option is that you put in enough effort that the relationship is deeper. Those are the two directions you can go, right? So you can explain your excuse for why you failed to do whatever it is, and your spouse forgives you and says, "No problem. I'm never going to mention it again. You're right. It's fine. I forgive you." But there's still something there, and the only way to deal with that is if the result of this whole experience, you end up giving more gifts, and you end up putting more effort into the relationship, and that way the relationship gets deeper. And the same thing is true with our relationship with Hashem. And that's really the essence of what a carbon is. God doesn't need animals to be burnt. It's not what God needs. Right? Hashem has all the animals. The point is Hashem wants you to bring it. The point is, after you've been forgiven, right? First of all, obviously it can't be done before you're forgiven. A person doesn't do teshuva and brings a gift to the king. Oh, I might be continuing sinning. I never made a decision that I'm going to stop. And it's not teshuva shalema. I'm not regretting the past. I haven't confessed anything. But here's a gift. Please accept me. The gift is thrown back in your face. So first of all, it has to be after teshuva, and it has to be after you're forgiven. That's for sure. But the primary objective of the carbon is that the person give of himself. That I'm bringing a gift. Because I recognize that even though you forgive me, I recognize that there's still something missing over here, and therefore I have to put more into this relationship. I can't just go back to the way it was. I can't just, remove that detail. And this is the difference between kapara, mentioned in the last perek, and the carbon that we're doing here now. The kapara mentioned in the last perek just replaces what used to happen, what's missing. So sin caused a little problem. The problem's been removed, but it's stagnant at that point. It's stale, even if we removed whatever the technical sin brought. This chapter, now you're deepening the relationship. That's the only way to go. You're giving a carbon. You're giving of yourself. The carbon is sacrifice, both literally an animal sacrifice, and sacrifice as in a personal sacrifice. You're giving something of yourself to reinvest in the relationship, so that doesn't just remain stale because, I messed up, I got forgiven, and now I'm good. No, I'm putting more in because I know that I messed up, and if I really want to get back in your good graces, even though I know you've already forgiven me. That's really the only direction that the relationship can go after there's been a problem. Now the Alter Rebbe addresses in the parentheses what the translation of the word mechaperes means, what the translation of the word kapara is here. Because he quoted the Gemara, which said that the oila is a kapara for failing to do a positive commandment. Mechaperes, it's a kapara. In the previous chapter, he said that kapara means to cleanse, to wipe, to polish the neshama. And over here, he's saying in chapter 2 that this carbon is brought after you've already gotten that kapara. So there has to be another translation to the word kapara. There has to be another translation to the word mechaperes. And therefore he says, Uveloshin mechaperes, and the term used by the Gemara which says mechaperes, that this carbon is mechaperes, is a form of kapara. V'chein, likewise, mashkas b'Torah, that which the Torah writes, the verse we quoted earlier, that this carbon, this offering which is offered after a person's forgiven for his failing to do a positive commandment, and it causes him to be wanted, to atone for him. This is not an atonement for his neshama, because the neshama has negativity attached to it, like in the previous chapter, and therefore he needs an atonement, and it's got to be cleansed. No, it's not an atonement for his neshama. His neshama is fine; it's been cleansed. To atone for him before God, not to atone for the neshama because the neshama has a problem, but to atone for him in his relationship with Hashem. That he should become, and again, to be pleasing before his Maker. The Gemara there states that he should be wholesome and complete for a will, that is, he should be willed and desired by Hashem. So the term kapara here is kind of like, Steindal's points to this, like koifer nafshe, like you give of yourself. And by giving of yourself, not that you've cleansed yourself, you've already been cleansed, but by giving of yourself, you now atone for the relationship. Not for your neshama. Your neshama has already been cleansed by God. But you're atoning and cleansing for you're atoning for your relationship. And that's what the term kapara means. So there's two translations to the word kapara. Kapara in the previous chapter, the first kapara is cleansing the neshama, because there's negativity attached to it. And the second kapara is to atone for the marred relationship, even though your neshama has already been cleansed. But you now need to atone for the severed relationship. So now we have no base of mikdash, so there is no carbon. So what's now? Va'achshava now, she'ein lano carbon, where we have no offerings, lahafik ratzei mahashem, to re-enter into God's graces, hatainis u'makom carbon. Tainus, the fasting, is a replacement for the carbon. As the Gemara says, we mentioned this Gemara yesterday, that the diminishing of my of my fat and of my blood, shenismai, which is now becoming diminished because I'm refraining from eating today, kilu krafti lefanecha, as if I've offered before you. So again, the point here is, just like the carbon is, a person gives of himself. God doesn't need the animal. The point is, you've given of yourself. It's an investment, a sacrifice you're making. So the fasting is also a sacrifice you're making. Quite literally. You're giving of yourself in the day of not eating. And therefore, after a person has done teshuvah properly, and after a person's been forgiven, today, in replacement, or at least post-biblical times, we'll see in chapter 3 what happens actually today, but in post-biblical times, where there's no more carbon, a person can fast to give of himself so that he can fix the relationship that was severed, that was broken by the sin, after he's been forgiven. Therefore, we find various different sages of the Gemara, whether the Mishnaic age or Gemara age, various different sages, shall davar kal, for a very, very minor thing. They would fast, many fasts. Right, in the previous chapter, we talked about the fasts that a person does as a prayer, that is kapara, that is atonement, should happen quicker or something like that. Those were for someone who violated a negative commandment, which is of the highest order, for which he would be liable for capital punishment, of which the Mishnah said he has to get suffering in life for kapara. So he's fasting, trying to avoid that, or trying to bring it on, or whatever he's trying to do there with his fasting. Over here, it's for a very light issue. It's not because he did, God forbid, a negative commandment of that tall order. It's a light commandment he failed to do, and yet the Gemara says that our sages did fast, many fasts for that. And the Alter Rebbe brings 3 examples. And of course, the Rebbe addresses why these 3 examples and why in this order, and why the precise reading, but that's not for now. Kamoi, for example, the first of the 3 examples, Rabbi Lezer ben Azariah. Rabbi Lezer ben Azariah, Shaya Mater, he said his view was that it's permissible that a cow should walk out on Shabbos with a strap, shebein karna, which is between its horns, b'Shabbos on Shabbos. And the sages forbade it. So there's a dispute in the Mishnah. The Mishnah lists a bunch of things that an animal is allowed to walk out with on Shabbos while it's still wearing it, because it's considered an article of clothing, and things that it can't walk out wearing because it's not considered an article of clothing, it's considered an ornament which is carrying, even for the animal. So the sages say that you're not allowed to have the cow go out with a strap between its horns. And Elizabeth Azariah said it's okay. Now, Pamachas, one time, Yotza came Parasa Shashchente. So his neighbor, nice Jewish lady, who had a cow, and this cow had a strap between the horns, and the cow walked out. Now, this lady, it's possible that she even knew that the great sage who lives next door to her, Rabbi ben Azariah, is of the opinion that it's permissible to let that cow walk out that way. But Rabbi ben Azariah v'loi michaba. Rabbi ben Azariah didn't protest. He should have stopped her. Because even though he's of the view that it's permissible, but he's in the minority, which means he understands that halacha does not follow his view. Right? And because he didn't stop her, he didn't violate her. Never mind, he didn't violate the sages. It was his neighbor that violated the sages. And never mind, they just ran, a random issue that she violated. She violated in a manner that he thinks is permissible. But from the fact that he didn't stop her and didn't maintain the words of his sages, he fasted so much that his teeth became black. That's how much he fasted. This is a very light sin. And he fasted so much because he didn't substantiate the words of his friends, even though he's of the opinion that it's permissible. Example number 1. Example number 2, Rabbi Shua ben Chananya, who was one of the sages of the school of Beis Hillel. And the Gemara relates that there was a specific machlek, a specific dispute between the house of Shammai and the house of Hillel with regard to, if I remember correctly, it's the laws of Tumah, the laws of impurity. And Rabbi Shua ben Chananya felt that the words of the house of Shammai have no reason. And therefore he said, he said, I'm embarrassed by you. He's embarrassed by Shammai's view. That's how much he thought it didn't make sense. And then later, one of the students of Shammai explained to him the view. He felt terrible for saying that he's embarrassed, now that he sees that there's logic to their view. So he went to the kvarim, he went to the burial sites of some of the students of Shammai, prostrated himself, and saying, I'm humbling myself before you, begging forgiveness, and him too, and then they're fasting to atone for the fact that he said, I'm embarrassed by your view, to the point that his teeth became blackened. For example, the halach is that the straps of tefillin, the outside of the straps of tefillin need to be blacked, need to be black and the inside could be white, but the outside needs to be black. And when his one day his tefillin straps flipped over, exposing the white end. And he fasted 40 fasts because his tefillin turned around. Okay, in Rabbis and many such examples. And again, all of this is not because they need this for the Teshuvah. They certainly don't, as we explained in chapter 1. They're only doing this because after they did Teshuvah and they've been forgiven by Hashem, they want to now rebuild the relationship. So they fasted all this thing to make as a gift to Hashem, to show Hashem that they're giving of themselves because they're reinvesting in the relationship, as we just explained. And based on this idea of after one does Teshuvah and after one is forgiven, one still needs to fast to show of Hashem that they're investing in the relationship to rebuild it. Limud HaArizal, the Arizal taught L'Talmidav to his students, Al Pi Chachmas Emes, based on Kabbalah, Mispar Somos, the different numbers of fasts, L'Kama Avonis, for their various different sins, V'Chatoyim, for different sins, Af She'enim Behen Kares, even though the sins for which he said the number of fasts, there's no kares, there's no excision by heaven, and there's no capital punishment by heaven, and certainly not by the court, and they're minor sins, so to speak. Kamoi, for example, alakas, for anger. The Arizal says, Kuf Nun Av Taniyas, a person should fast 151 fasts. 151 is the gematria, is the numerical value of the word kas, l'cholo, etc. So kas is not a violation, not biblical nor rabbinic, but it's a severe issue, as we'll explain in some later chapter, because anger shows on a lack of faith. Why are you getting angry if you trust Hashem? And therefore, in that sense, it's quite severe, so there's a lot of fasts.
It's all cost different. How do you get 151?
151 plus, how much is it? It's 140...
Well, maybe plus the name itself.
Plus the letters. Plus 3 letters, right?
I got it.
Yeah? Plus the 3 letters of kas. Yeah. But I feel listed there Rabbanon, and even for a rabbinic prohibition, like regular wine that was made by prepared by a non-Jew, right? So there's a biblical prohibition that a person is not allowed to drink or eat anything that was used for idol worship. So if a non-Jew took a wine and poured a libation to an idol, you're not allowed to drink that wine. So the sages came and forbade regular wine that a non-Jew made, even if you don't know if he used it for idol worship, because we don't know where it came from. Especially back in the day, this was, your random non-Jewish neighbor living in Babylon or in Rome was probably serving idols, and therefore the sages forbade stam yenam, just regular wine, even if you don't know necessarily that it was used for idol worship. So says the Arizal, for drinking that wine, Yasani, you should fast Ayin Gimel Taniyas, 73 fasts. The gematria of the word yayin, the gematria of the word.
3 here.
No, sorry.
Here it goes on 3 letters. It's 70 Yud Yud Nun, but maybe 3 letters.
3 letters also.
Here it's one word. Here it's 3 letters.
Yeah, I don't know how the gematrias work.
Here it's a gimel.
Yeah. Tanya is v'cholu, etc. And likewise for failing to do a rabbinic injunction, tefillah, like prayer. Not that prayer is rabbinic, but the times of prayer are rabbinic. The Rebbe makes this point. Yisani, you should fast samach al taniyes, 61 fasts. 61 is the gematria of ani, the word I. Vani tefillah, I offer prayers. The word ani is 61. So 61 fasts for failing to daven on time. You imagine that? V'cholu, etc. So all of this is because it's not in replacement of teshuvah. It's not what it is at all. It's not even to elicit a kapara, an atonement. This is all after the person's been forgiven. He's doing these fasts to reinvest in the relationship, as we explained. The derech klal, and just generally speaking, you should know, says the Alter Rebbe, soid hatainis. There's a secret. There's an illusion behind the idea of fasting. He's skula nefla. It's a wonderful. What's the how do you translate the word skula? A wonderful. Sorry. How do you translate the word segula? A wonderful auspician. Is that a word? Creates an auspicious. I don't know how to translate the word segula. Sorry. Yeah, that means like a prized nation. But segula here means like it's a it's a wonderful measure that a person can take to reveal, to elicit Hashem's divine desire. Baruch be blessed. Kamaya carbon, just like a carbon. We explained before from the Gemara that the fasting, where a person's giving up of his own fat, of his own body, is like a carbon where a person gives up of himself to offer in the temple. And just like the offering in the temple can create a divine grace, so does the fast. Shneimar, as the verse reads, boy, with respect to carbon offering, Reich Nechel Hashem is pleasing unto Hashem, so likewise the fasting can create this pleasing reaction from Hashem. As Yeshaya says, this comes from the Haftarah of Yom Kippur. And over there, the prophet says about a fast. Do you call this a fast? And do you call this a day of divine grace? Because they were fasting incorrectly, because there was fights going on. So even though they were fasting, but there was hatred and fight. So says the prophet, is this a fast? Is this going to create divine grace? So what does this prove? Machlal, this proves that if the fast is done right, Shatzayim HaNirtzeh, that a fast which is done right, Hu Yom Ratzin, does create a divine grace. So now we have the fourth element of Teshuvah, the fourth step. So to recap completely, we have, number one, the essence of Teshuvah, the decision to no longer rebel, no longer sin, to no longer rebel against Hashem, the essence of Teshuvah. Then the Shleimus Teshuvah, the completion of Teshuvah, the perfection of Teshuvah, which comes along with Vidoy, confession, Charata, regret, and all the other things that are also halachically obligated. This elicits a kapara. And the third element is that if a person violated such a commandment for which he's nervous that the kapara might come through pain in life, so he can fast in a sort of prayer, asking Hashem that his kapara be quicker, or that his kapara shouldn't be too painful, or something like that. And then finally, we get to chapter 3. The next level is that after a person's been forgiven, but still the relationship is not the way it was before he sinned, even if he's forgiven, even if his debt and his account has been wiped clean, he still wants to reinvest in the relationship, and for that you need to give a gift. You need to give of yourself. So in temple times that was a carbon, and post-temple times that is fasting, giving up of yourself. But of course, this is only after Teshuvah and after you're being forgiven. Because if you give a gift before you're forgiven and before you actually change your ways, the gift is thrown back in your face. And God willing, in chapter 3 tomorrow, we will get to how the fasts are implemented today, and if they are implemented at all.
You said the third grade also.